Welcome to the Journey of Self-Growth podcast, episode 10. I am ThE, the host of this event, which is created so myself and others can share a perspective on the concept of it in hopes that one another's insights would be relatable, establishes awareness, and inspires listeners to adopt and maintain such behavior. The definition of self-growth is the process of developing new skills, actions, reactions, attitudes, and I think that's it. In hopes that which can be beneficial to and have a beneficial impact on your life and increases your overall well-being. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in today. If you have any questions or comments during the live stream, you're welcome to do so by submitting them in the chat, and we will try to address them accordingly at our convenience. Today, I have a new special guest, and his name is Skull Smith. Hello, Skull. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty standardly. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you asking. What can you tell me about yourself?
Well, I love to create things. I love to create music. I love to create virtual theme parks. I love to act. Pretty much anything involving creation. I love to do it.
Wow, that sounds creative.
Moderately.
And what would be your perspective on the concept of self-growth?
Well, I believe it's a key that can open many, many doors for you. And the most important of which, of course, is living as your most authentic self. Sometimes your most authentic self gets caught in a tongue twister, but even then, as long as you are consistently growing each day and chiseling away the parts of yourself that no longer serve that authentic self, then you are doing well for yourself.
Wow, that's interesting. I relate to what you're saying, and I think we will elaborate. I'll inquire more about that as we continue into the podcast. My next question is, how are you currently growing?
Well, what I've gotten pretty good at doing over the past year or so is identifying an emotion and finding the root of that emotion. It's generally a negative emotion that no longer serves me. And what I do is if I feel a negative emotion, I'll lie down usually to do this, and I will try to find the source of this negative emotion. And usually I will go through thoughts, and whichever one I don't want to think about at the time is exactly the one I need to think about at the time. So once I do that, I look at the emotion, I look at the source, and I try to understand why this emotion is still here, what's still unresolved about it, and what needs to be done, what needs to be addressed in order to resolve that. So I've been doing that every day this year.
Wow, that's a unique strategy and method to adopt and apply to yourself with the intent to grow yourself. And I find that intriguing. I don't think I'm aware of such a strategy. So I am open to considering applying such behavior for myself if I am faced with a similar challenge such as yourself. I I do appreciate you mentioning emotion, because similar to yourself, I think me just having a self-awareness of the concept of emotion, and also just the internal sensations of what an emotion is something that I've longed to understand and relate to.
Mhm.
I find that individuals tend to use the word often in conversation, especially when it involves conflicts, arguments, um, misunderstandings. Some people will say, "Oh, you're being so emotional," or "You're acting out of emotion rather than using logic."
Hmm.
I think for me, maybe the best way I relate to the concept of emotion is I theorize that an emotion is actually a reactive function of the human body, and I'll use an analogy to describe what I mean. I think if there was a cup of water that is still, or no, I'll take that back. If there is a pond that is still or calm, and the surface has no ripples, I don't think that, well, I'll take it back. Yeah, still using that analogy, a calm pond whose surface has no ripples, that is then um having a stone or a rock thrown into it, which causes ripples and waves. That that's the best way I describe or relate to the idea of an emotion. Another way to describe it is, if I'm at a comedy show, I won't start voluntarily laughing at the comedian until he expresses himself. Otherwise, if I just start laughing without the joke being told, it probably would seem strange and kind of weird. Just randomly laughing without some sort of external influence. So that's helped me to have a better realization of what emotions is. It's like a reactive mechanism versus an I don't know, the opposite of what reactive would be. But I want to get your perspective on how I described emotion, and how relatable is what I said to you.
Yes, I would agree. It is a reaction or a response to something, and every emotion exists to signal something.
Mhm.
So if you have a negative emotion, it exists because there's a problem generally. And that's not to say that the problem is one that exists presently. It could be a problem from the past that was never resolved, but the emotion, any negative emotion such as anger or sadness or fear, they all exist to address a problem. But a lot of the times people will focus on the emotion itself. They will dwell on the emotion for any amount of time, but they won't eventually try to figure out what's causing the emotion. But
Mhm.
as you say, it is a reaction to something. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. And if it does, there's still something beneath the surface that needs to be looked at generally.
When you're lying down trying to address, as you would say, a particular or maybe multiple emotional states, is it due to an experience that you have experienced, or is it simply like a vibration that has nothing to do with the external circumstance?
Generally, there's an experience involved, but sometimes it's a response to the experience. Sometimes it's some kind of programming, belief about yourself, for example, a belief about others that exists as a result of the experience. So sometimes the experience itself is not the trigger. Sometimes it's a negative self-belief or something that you've held on to, that
Mm-hmm.
that your body and your mind are telling you that you have to move on from this if you want to see a more authentic version of yourself.
Mm. Okay, so it seems like, and I can relate to what you said. And for the longest time, I theorized the the imposed self-doubts that I applied to myself was associated with emotion. But if emotion is a reactive mechanism, then maybe the self-doubt is something else. Um, how would you relate to that statement?
Well, the self-doubt comes from something within yourself
Mm-hmm.
that you believe in your physical self. You believe this to be the case, and often the self-doubt can trigger you to respond to other things with the same negative emotions. For example, if you believe something like I'm not good enough, for example, you're going to you might approach certain situations in life like that, or you might see, oh, this thing didn't work out as well as I thought it did. I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I'm not good enough. And that's going to make whatever that thing is, that situation, maybe something failed, that's going to make that feel a lot worse on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it seems like, from what I'm hearing, if you're dwelling in self-doubt and you experience an unexpected situation, um, that could be paralleling what you were experiencing prior to that experience, um, your self-doubt could be amplified because of that circumstance. Is that what you're saying?
And the emotion experienced would be amplified versus if you if that same thing just didn't work out, but you didn't have that same belief about yourself, you would not be emotionally affected to that
Mm-hmm.
degree.
Okay.
But much like emotions, yeah, the negative beliefs like self-doubt and other things like that, other negative self-image beliefs typically stem from something.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find the root of it, and you can resolve it and understand. You want to understand where it came from, why it rooted in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can understand why it's not true. You can find counter examples, and once you clear that belief, you will not be emotionally affected by it anymore.
Mm. From my perspective, or my journey in life, I fortunately have been able to become aware of why I have doubted myself. And for me, it ultimately came down to adopting commentaries or behaviors of someone outside of myself that was um, implicating myself by them. And when you're no longer in the presence of that individual, by imposing or reinforcing what they told you, our bodies will comply to those ideas. Our bodies won't tell us, oh, we shouldn't be telling ourselves that. It will simply just allow you to program it. It would seem.
Oh yeah.
Like I've talked about phobias in another episode, and how if someone is afraid of a snake, they're imposing a form of self-hypnosis on themselves, and our bodies, because it's always living in the present, can't distinguish the imaginative snake in our heads attacking us from the snake not actually being in the world and not being there at all. So when we actually see a snake, for example, tomorrow, our bodies are going to react due to the imposition of the idea from yesterday. And so that having an understanding of phobias helped me to, I think, at this point in my life, overcome a lot of the self-doubt that I've had in my life. And I think for me, in order to maintain that clear mind, I've discovered that I need to be focused and using my sensibilities, such as my sight, my hearing, taste. These are all functionalities that helps me to like maintain being present. I feel like when I am creating ideas in my head, or creating a voice in my head, generating a voice in my head, it distracts me from using my senses. And that helps me to realize, oh, I'm not being present and I need to be present. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I fell into the temptation of starting to think about a potential circumstance that I was predicting that was going to happen. And I had food in the microwave. Since I was willfully in my head, my food overcooked.
Mm.
And I think by being in my head, I lost awareness of what was happening in the present, which was wanting my food to be cooked at a certain temperature and at a certain time. And I was like, wow, if I would have been focusing on the timer in the microwave focusing on the timer in the microwave as it was counting down, I probably would have caught it rather than generating this voice in my head thinking about a possibility that hasn't even occurred yet. How would you relate to that?
Well, you bring up a good point about that. Is what you're describing is what I call the worst case scenario mindset, which is where you start to think about something and think about everything that could go wrong. Think about, oh, I could do this, but it could just blow up in my face completely. So why even try? A lot of people have this mindset, and it holds them back. But it also reinforces the fear within them.
Yes, I agree with you.
But they're fearing something that's not even real. It's something they've created.
Yes. And I think the overall message that I want to say to the viewers is that I truly believe by creating like fearful images in our heads, it has an impact on our overall bodies, because I think our overall bodies cannot distinguish the thought that we have in our head from what is actually happening outside of ourselves in the present. So the thought that we have in our head is a part of the present, And so our bodies is going to react to that. And it ultimately it's going to have like from at least from my experience, like a detrimental impact when I do that. So I want to ask you about your creativity. Um, I'm curious to know what inspired you to be creative.
Well, about a little over 10 years ago, I realized that I had always been hearing music in my head,
Hmm.
and I figured that was normal. I thought everybody always heard music in their head, and some of the times it was music that didn't exist in the physical realm. I thought, oh, yeah, everybody does that. But that's about when I found out, oh, no, that's not the case. People are not constantly hearing melodies in their head. This is a little bit unusual. So about that time, I figured, oh, I could create music this way. I could take the melodies in my head and put them into this physical realm we see in front of us. But before that, I didn't really think about it. I just gravitated as a kid towards games that involved creating worlds. I liked to build cities as a kid, neighborhoods. Of course, I still build the virtual theme parks over 20 years later. Um, but I didn't really think about it. I like to play games where you could design the levels. I did. I any chance I got, I had to build something. I had to create something, and uh, music eventually became a part of that. And acting to me became a part of that. I just like to create characters. I like to be in scenes, to enjoy that, all sorts of things. So I suppose it wasn't really something that inspired me initially to be creative. It's just something I have always gravitated towards.
Mm. Are there people who are there people in your lives who also relate to your behavior that may be older that could have been an inspiration to you?
Uh, well, definitely for self growth. Several of them are actually watching right now.
Mm,
They and they have helped me. They've helped me so much because I did not. I don't want to make it seem like I did this alone, because I definitely did not.
mm,
I've had I've made wonderful friends over my whole life, but over the past couple of years, who are specifically involved in self growth.
mhm,
And of course, that they've helped me understand all of these concepts, and they've just been so supportive to me, and I'm so grateful to them. And on the creative side, I have friends also who are equally supportive of everything I do creatively, and they are here as well. And there's overlap, of course,
mhm.
and they every time I put out a new song, it's, I think, oh, I had my old self-doubt thoughts. Oh, this isn't going very far. But then I hear the response, that they've heard my song and they've loved it. And that's really the best part
Mhm,
about creating something, is the joy it brings to somebody.
mhm. Yeah, I'm a songwriter and creator of music myself. I I think in terms of creativity, we are somewhat on the same bandwidth, a wavelength. Um, it could be a Smith thing. My last name is Smith also.
There you go. Could be. It's in our blood.
But I I think for me in terms of music, I was exposed to experiences as a child. My father listened to a lot of music, and fortunately, the music that he listened to, I resonated with, and it excited me to the point where it inspired me to want to create music that would be a homage to the stuff that I listened to. I wanted
Mm,
to I wanted to contribute to to the the quality of music that I heard before. I,
yeah.
I, yes, I wanted the tree of music to continue to grow and flourish through my nurturing of it, um, via my songwriting and performances. Where are how creative are your parents?
Um, I would say more than they allow themselves to be. It, they, I mean, my mother, she can, she doesn't give herself enough credit for the fact that she can draw like photorealistic depictions of people.
Wow.
And, so something like that, for example, there's self-doubt that's unresolved.
Hmm.
So, but if they wanted to take a creative path, then yes, they could have if they wanted to.
Hmm.
They've just chosen to subdue it,
Hmm.
and that's their choice. They're whatever they feel called to do in life. That's really up to them.
When you if you witnessed your mother making these drawings as a kid, how would you react?
I didn't have anything to compare it to as a kid. I just thought, oh yes, she's an adult, so she's had more drawing experience. So eventually, everybody gets to that point. That's pretty much the thought process I had as a kid.
Hmm. Okay.
But
And well, you did I mean, you did say that it was a process. You were able to see her, um, I would imagine, start to finish, starting the starting drawing the picture to the end. And I think though that process in itself could be an inspiration to you subconsciously.
it could be, and because as a kid, I I thought, oh, I'm a terrible artist with these crayons, but I'm a kid. We all are. But she's got, she has so much drawing experience that when adults draw for 30 some years, yeah, they get really really good. So
Mm.
I always figured that, yeah, obvious, everybody, yeah. I didn't realize that until later, that it was such an amazing skill, and that not everybody, of course, has developed this.
Hmm. Did you say that your mother, similar to yourself, experienced or is experiencing like self-doubt in terms of her creativity and drawing skills?
Yes, because I believe, of course, she has the ability to be an artist full time, and to just devote her life to creating. She can draw. She's also very talented with Photoshop. She can she can she puts together very elaborate posters, and she comes up with it all herself. So
Wow.
she has all the makings of somebody who could be a professional artist, but she just it's her own belief that she can't, that has kept her from doing that full time.
The reason why I asked that question in context to yourself is because I theorize that we tend to pick up on the subtleties of our parents and their behaviors, which can have an impact on our on ourselves. And I will say as a child, when I achieved accomplishments such as in school or in sports, which I was aware of, then someone outside of myself would want to celebrate me or celebrate my contribution to the overall goal. I had this reaction that I didn't understand. It would be like, oh, I don't want people to like celebrate what I did. I don't want attention on me. And I didn't understand why I was doing that, but I was aware that I was doing it. And when I would do it in the moment, I felt really bad internally. And maybe like 2 years ago, I had a conversation with my dad, and my dad told me, just in casual conversation, he said, I struggle with people shining a light on what I do. And I try to like avoid doing things that people would recognize. I was like, oh, wow. But I never knew that as a kid. He never told me that. But I think visually, maybe I was picking up on body language, which resulted in me behaving similarly. And I was like, that's interesting.
It is.
And I think that now that he had that conversation with me, if I were to have children, I think that I would willfully try to conduct myself in an open-minded, non-phobic way, because I wouldn't want these subtle nuances and behaviors to influence my child's growth. And surprisingly, I haven't discovered any readings that discuss or talk about what I'm having a conversation with you about. And I don't think, all the details in life is written down. So I think that's why it's important to just have that sense of awareness and not be so distracted with ourselves to the point where we could miss out on blessings that could help us to better ourselves.
Very true.
Yeah.
But it is the case. You pick up as a child, of course. Yeah. If you with your parents all the time, you're going to pick up on subtleties in regards to them. You're going to pick up both on positive and negative emotions, beliefs, all sorts of things. And sometimes they can stick with you for decades and you don't even know that they're there. And they can influence your own beliefs about yourself. And then you end up finding something that needs to be resolved that you didn't even know that was put there.
Yes, I agree. I admire your willingness to like make virtual theme parks and simulations. Is it something that is a hobby, or would you be open to being doing it as a profession in some form?
There are people who do this at a masterful level out there, and they do not make a cent from it, but they'll put in hundreds, maybe thousands of hours into a park. One map that's maybe like 10,000 tiles in a game, and And they don't do it, of course, for the money, because there's no way to monetize it at this time, but they love the process. They love the just everything that goes into to making the park.
Mm-hmm.
And they love looking at the finished product of the project. And so I would say, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to making money off it, but I'm not going to stop doing it
Mm-hmm.
just because it's something I do with money not even coming to mind.
I admire that. What intrigued me about what you just recently stated is that you said you would do it even if you weren't compensated for it,
I'm not.
which to me seems that your involvement in making it would be a genuine passion versus doing it for superficial reasons, which a person could do, such as doing it as simply for a conversational piece.
Yeah. Not that that's necessarily wrong, but if they don't enjoy the process of making it, you can see it like any other art medium. You can see it in the finished product.
Mm-hmm. There was something else that I wanted to address when you said that sometimes you were, I think you said you were considering creating or releasing music, and due to the friendships and bonds that you have with other fellow creators, they inspire you to initiate doing something, which helps you to overcome your self-doubt. I think when it comes to the concept of initiation is essential for self-growth, because I think without an initiation, we may not experience an opportunity to advance ourselves, be it work, relationships, or lifestyles. I like to use the analogy of an echo. If I'm in a valley and I don't yell out into it, I may never experience my echo.
Right.
I have a friend who enjoys writing scripts as a screenwriter, and I try to encourage him to not stop doing it, because I think it's possible that he may doubt that, well, I can write a script and it could be good, but maybe no one else will appreciate it. So therefore, I choose not to initiate. I think the way the universe works, it's like a reflective mechanism. It's going to react based on how we act. So
Right.
if I don't initiate, how will I ever experience an opportunity to elevate what I hope to achieve?
If you don't initiate writing that screenplay, you miss the opportunity. Forget all the opportunities that the finished screenplay has. You miss the opportunity to write it.
Mm-hmm.
You deprive yourself of enjoying the process of writing the script by creating a version of reality where it fails before it's even written.
Yes. I read a book called The Big Leap, and the author used the analogy of golf in terms of self-development compared to other sports, because I guess with other sports, which could be a team sport, a person may say like, oh, I didn't do this because the person outside of myself was obstructing my way and I couldn't move left or right. But with golf, he says the ball the golf ball won't move unless we take a swing. If we don't swing, then it will simply stay unmobile.
It's true.
And I resonate with that analogy. And after I had read that, it helped me to be more accountable of how I conduct myself from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's a very, very good way to think about it. So yeah, you're not going to see any improvements in your own life if you choose to just stay in place for all of it.
In terms of self-doubt, are your self-doubts generally focused on one aspect of life, or can it vary?
Well, it really depends on the circumstance. It's usually the ones I've been focusing on have been the ones related to that which I create. And I found a lot of it is just because I compare myself to more successful by numbers people who have, yeah, their songs have reached millions of people, and I think, well, my songs haven't reached millions of people, so I must not be good enough. That would be an old self-doubt thought from years ago. And of course that's not the case. That's not a cause and effect. It's not a result of the quality of me, and it's not even a direct result of the quality of that which I create. It just happens to be a very, very complex method to get music to that many people, and it's a method I just don't know at this time. And that's really the only thing, but it doesn't correspond to me as a person and being, good enough as a musician, good enough as a creator, when people still respond with the same amount of joy from listening to my song as they do to this very established artist. If I look at that comparison instead, it would say, oh, I'm just as good as this artist. But self-doubt, when I was in that state of mind, I was not focusing on that aspect. I was thinking, oh, it's my numbers are lower, so I must be doing something wrong. And it must be the music's fault. I would look for the flaws, and I would think, oh, this could be a flaw. This could be one of the reasons. And then I would try to fix that, and it would be something like a plug-in on a track that has nothing to do with anything. And I would think, oh, I fixed that. Now why is it still not working? I would find the completely unrelated variables and focus on them, not realizing that it's just it was old fears, old self-doubts that I needed to acknowledge in order to accept that these things are not as simple as they are when you completely oversimplify them.
In contrast to your theme park building or engineering, are you challenged with self-doubt more with music making compared to the theme park engineering?
In that regard, I was for a while more, because with the theme park making, nobody in the entire community, with the exception of a couple YouTube streamers, makes any money building virtual theme parks in a 20-year-old game. So everybody in the whole community is just doing it because they enjoy it. And if everybody is, they want to build, and they want to build a better park every time, they want to grow in the process of building. So it's not something that where there are really any stakes involved.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, of course, in creating music, I invented the stakes. I said, I believe that, if my music doesn't make any money, I'm not going to be able to survive. I'm not going to have a means for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go into survival mode, and it creates these doubts. And it says, well, your numbers aren't high enough. You're never gonna excel. You're not excelling. You're failing because you can survive on this amount of money that you're making from your songs. So you need to work harder. You need to push yourself harder. You need to exert yourself more, because society will tell you that's the answer. But it takes a while to decondition yourself from that.
The reason why I asked that question the reason why I posed the question to you, because I recall that you said you're willing to make the virtual theme parks without compensation. And it seems like, in comparison to your music making, the expectation of, maybe the possible expectation of making money by utilizing your creativity to make music could be the reason why you have the self-doubt more so in that area.
Yes.
I mean, I would suggest not expecting to be compensated, because I do think in general having expectations can be at least for me, can be distractive. I think when I make music, or if I'm writing a song, I write it without the expectation that someone outside of myself would appreciate it or enjoy it. And it helps me to just be more focused on my craft. And similar to when you're making the theme parks, while I'm writing the song, I can intuitively sense I'm enjoying the process. And for me, that's enough. And so I just wanted to share my perspective on my creative process, in hopes that it will be relatable to you, because I don't think no one enjoys self-doubt, or
No, definitely not. Maybe one or two people, but other than that, I think nobody enjoys it. Yeah, it's true. I had to break away from the connection between music and money, and I had to address the fact that money should not be a factor in any creative art, and that this is just a problem that exists in the world already, but it doesn't need to be a problem that affects me and my emotional state. So I don't create music to make money. I do like it. I do like the idea of reaching more and more people each time. I think because that's what I love most, is when it actually reaches somebody and it has a positive impact on them. That's one of my big reasons for creating something and releasing it to the world, as opposed to just creating something that only I see.
I can say I have listened to your music, and when I listen to it, I do like the emotion that gets stimulated within me is happiness, or some of the music is humorous to me too. So I enjoy like laughter, or just feeling good, happy. So I appreciate your music.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do want to bring joy to people, even if only a tiny bit. If I can bring even just that much to a listener, then I can feel that I've succeeded.
Where are we? Okay. Um, what can you tell me about your relationships that are valuable to you, and how did you establish them?
Well, I found that, the right people find you at the right time.
Mhm.
And, over time, you can distinguish whose intentions are pure, and those people they continue to be in your life, and
Mhm.
they're the people whom they're people who add value to your life, and whose lives you add value. And you just know by the way you feel around them. You're always happy around them. You're always they uplift you. You're uplifted just by being around them.
Mm. So it seems like, in general, up, being uplifted matters in life.
It doesn't hurt most of the time.
For me, um, in regards to the relationships that I have in my life, I I believe I attracted them also. I think that's what you were alluding to. You weren't searching for them. They, I guess, manifested, or you encountered them. Um, and for me, I sense I sense a person's authenticity because I'm able to have a sense of myself and how authentic I am. And that allows me to relate to someone else's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
because I think ultimately when it comes to relationships, the root word is relate. And
Mm.
I think a person can or cannot, a person will or will not relate to uh actions or behaviors of another person. And I think not relating to someone is okay too.
Yeah.
The reason why you may not relate to them is because of your phase of growth in the present moment, or their phase of growth in the present moment, which you can also say maturity.
Yeah. And
I mean,
yeah.
me personally, I know that um, I'm honest. I am self-disciplined. I tend not to want to get involved in chaotic lifestyles. I willfully choose to not expose myself to experiences that could potentially have me in like a detrimental situation. So when I hear people expressing themselves similar to how I am now, and in addition to also observing them, um, walking, what's the word? Talking the talk, walking the walk, walking the
Mm.
walk. When I see them walking the walk, in addition to them talking the talk, that naturally attracts me to them and wants to create a stronger bond with them because of me conducting myself in the same way. um, but I will say it's not it's not something that is predictable too. I encounter people that don't reflect who I am often, and when I do experience those types of situations, it's tempting to break free of the norm and do something else, which I have when I was younger. But I learned from experience that it's better to just stay the course and not do things that were obviously not going to be beneficial to my growth. Have you
Right.
experienced something similar?
Yeah. In the past, I've been in, not just with friendships, but with romantic relationships in the past. I've been in situations where, I didn't realize at the time, but I entered the relationship because for the wrong reasons. It was for maybe I was lonely at the time, or I didn't see myself as enough, or I had other negative self-beliefs, and that was the root of why I entered this relationship. And I thought that somehow this other person, as you would say, outside of myself, was going to somehow solve or help me solve these internal issues completely externally.
Mm.
And in those cases, yes, it's true. Those relationships, whether it be romantic or a friendship, if you're there for the wrong reasons, or they're in it for the wrong reasons, or both, it's eventually you're going to find that your life paths are inevitably going to split from each other, because you're not, if you're growing and the other person is growing a different way, you're not growing together, you're going to eventually, by definition, you're going to grow apart.
Mm.
Or
Yes.
if the other person is not growing and you're growing, you're not going to be in that same place as where you started, even if the other person is.
Okay. So based on that statement, people who choose to stay together, would you theorize people who choose to stay together and are conducting themselves in detrimental ways as individuals stay together because their lifestyles are relatable to one another?
In some cases, yes. If people are good for each other's growth, if they're growing together and people are understanding themselves in the relationship, then if it's working for both people and they're not making tremendous sacrifices to be with this person, that's a big thing, then yes, it can exist indefinitely. But if the people are staying together out of fear, for example, they're afraid to be alone, or they think they're never going to find anybody like this, or something like that. But they're not growing together, and they're hindering each other in the process. Sometimes neither person even will notice for a while. Then the natural course would be for those two to split apart. And sometimes they're trying to split apart, but one or both people are trying to hold it together because they think that's correct. But really, they're just keeping both people stuck.
That's interesting. I think based on what you said, and the reasons why they would stay together, and also taking into consideration, which I think you agree, that self-awareness is vital, that those two individuals who are staying together based on fear, to me, would seem like they are maybe lacking a heightened degree of self-awareness. So therefore, they tend to want to be distractive to one another based on fear of losing that person.
Right. They're generally not aware of why they're with the person. And they often might think about being with somebody else, but they might say, well, I'm already here, so might as well, kind of thing. This happens in a lot of romantic relationships. But I like to think that I'm at a point in my life now where I'm not, there isn't any existing relationship for me that's like that. And I wouldn't say there has been for at least a year or so.
That's good. Yeah, I haven't experienced like a detrimental like intimate relationship, but I have had like um associates who I thought were being authentic with me, just like do a completely 360.
Mm.
And it surprised me so much because I invested months with this person, spent time with them, hung out with them, had dinner, and then all of a sudden, just one day they stop answering my calls, and I reach out to them because I'm concerned now. There was no indication of why they did what they did. And then one day I see them and I try to talk to them, and they're just being extremely passive aggressive and not wanting to talk to me. I'm like, wow, did I know you as well as I thought I did? And why did I experience this in the first place?
Often you'll meet somebody and you'll be at their same level of growth when you meet them, but when you if you continue to grow at a different rate than this person, and this person sees that, they they can feel like that can trigger doubt in them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just something they have to resolve. But oftentimes they'll blame the person who grew for growing.
Wow. That's an impactful statement. I can relate to that. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. I didn't consider that, but it makes sense. Yeah. Um, what are you? Where are you currently creating?
Oh, I'm doing all sorts of stuff. I'm always creating new songs. I'm in various different stages of never before heard songs. I'm also remixing and remastering the ones I've already released so that I can re-release them with and just fix some of the things that are jarring on certain speaker systems.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm a little behind on my virtual theme parks, but
Mm-hmm.
I do have one little one in the works.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally, I like to write very silly short stories, so I do that every now and then also.
What software are you using to create these theme parks?
It's a Roller Coaster Tycoon 2.
That sounds familiar.
It should. It's over 20 years old.
Is the software dated?
What?
Is the software dated? Meaning that
Um, yes and no. So it's somebody, a group of freelance developers created an open source version within the past 10 years. And it's bypassed a lot of the limitations of the game, added some new features to the base game, but has also allowed it to be operational on any modern operating system.
oh, that's good.
Oh, yes, it is. Because otherwise you'd have to play with a disk, you'd have to make sure your system was compliant, all sorts of things. But the fact that they're doing it just like the people who build parks are just doing it because they enjoy it. So are these the freelance developers. They're not making money off it, to my knowledge. They're just doing it for the love of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely transformed this old game into something ever growing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still custom content being made. There's all sorts of, and it's a game that's isometric view. So it's, if you remember games or older games, they didn't have a 360-degree camera that you could rotate. It's just four different views on an isometric camera. So yes, you could say it's a little bit dated, but at the same time they've modernized it so well.
Oh, thank God.
Mhm.
In terms of your acting, are you how is there a particular genre of film that you would prefer to be an actor in, or are you open to any genres?
My favorite would be comedy. I really endlessly enjoy comedic roles, and if I were to write my own shows or movies or short films or anything, I would make them funny regardless, and I'd want to deliver funny lines in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been cast more recently in horror
Oh wow.
because I guess I'm typecast a little bit, just a little bit, but I like it. I like being typecast in this sense because it's kind of I've always I always kind of thought I would enjoy playing menacing characters, and it turns out that I do. So
Oh wow.
I've been in a few uh, short horror films as kind of not really a villain, but kind of a very menacing, imposing character.
Wow. That's surprising. When I man, my relationship with you, I don't get menacing and terrifying. I can see you
I
more
don't even.
like I can see you more like in comedic films. I think I would enjoy to watch you in a comedic film. I think you would do great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you have a sense of humor. Uh,
Sometimes. Luckily, today's Wednesday, and so I am funny on Wednesdays and alternating Sundays. So
Hypothetically, what what film that has been made do you think you would fit well into based on uh your personality?
oh, that is a very good question. That is a very good question. I think hmm, I would for a comedic role, I would like to play I probably enjoy playing a character in a Jim Carrey movie,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time I know that my personality is very different. I would be going very over the top for me for that. I would probably prefer a role like a Professor Farnsworth type role
Mm-hmm.
on Futurama. I would enjoy just playing kind of, oh yes, I'm going around my day and I'm saying all sorts of things, and oh I'm all sorts of very interesting things, and oh where in the world am I? That kind of character I think I would enjoy, just like with a lot of interesting things to say, but with major funny blind spots in the awareness. I think characters like that would be. I think it would be fun to play a detective who was kind of like that.
Oh wow. I can imagine you doing that.
Thank you.
I think the movie or the universe that I think you would fit well into would be the Austin Powers universe.
Oh yes, I would love to be in there anywhere, really.
Because you're well spoken. Um, and it's not well outside of Austin Powers, no one else is over the top, but they're still relevant to
Yeah,
his to the way he is. And I
yeah.
think, yeah, so I think your humor would like fit in well. I think you would be a good character in that universe.
Thank you. That is a very good compliment because the Austin Powers universe I consider to be one of the best comedy trilogies, and the best comedy trilogy that I can think of, because it's the only one where all three of them are really really funny to me. And
Mhm.
I saw the first one when I was 7, and I actually saw Goldmember in theaters when I was 8, and it was one of the DVDs. I remembered all of them. I would watch them all on repeat, but we got a DVD player around that time, and Goldmember was one of the first DVDs. And so I remember just watching it over and over and just loving it.
Yeah,
So
that one.
that is a huge compliment.
Yeah, that one. And then also, if I had a second pick, I would say Wayne's World.
Oh, yes. I like it. I like the ones where they break the fourth wall.
Yeah, I think you can do that one too.
That's a very knowledgeable security guard.
Great. I think we're going to proceed to the next section of our podcast, which is the multiple intelligence theory.
Ah, yes.
So I'm going to share my screen for the viewers so that they'll have perspective on the nine multiple intelligence theory. Okay. Can you see it, Skull?
I can.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give a brief description on the multiple intelligence theory. When it comes to intelligence, there are two main theorists, two popular theorists who theorize different theories on the multiple intelligences. One theorized that we as individuals have three forms of intelligences, which would be a naturalist scientific, mathematical / logical, and linguistic / writing. And this theory was adopted by the masses historically, and also to this day. The reason why, and so as a result, when we are tested in school, leaving high school, via the SAT, they test us on science, math, English generally. And depending on how well you perform in these fields of intellect, you'll be accepted at schools. There's another theorist whose name is Howard Gardner, and he theorized, in addition to the three intellects that I mentioned, there are also 6 additional intellects that we have, which are musical, existential, interpersonal, bodily kinesthetic, intrapersonal, and spatial. And we possess all 9 of these, and due to practice and through practice and repetition, we can enhance each one of these intellects. The reason why I present the multiple intelligence theory in the podcast is because I desire for others to become aware of this theory, because I think some people may be experiencing self-doubt if they don't have high degrees of intellect in math, writing, and science. You may have high intellect in music, nature, spatial, which I think Skull has. Spatial, when I think of spatial, I think of like the 3D world, creating virtual theme parks, that form of engineering. Some people may have maybe people person. A lot of people are attracted to their being because of their ability to communicate with them. And then some people have a high sense of self-discipline, do not break boundaries regardless of the circumstances. So that would be exemplified in interpersonal. And I think it's possible for each one of us, and I think I said this before, but I'll say it again. It's possible for each one of us to enhance each, excuse me, each intellect through practice and repetition. So with that being said, Skull, I want to ask you, of the 9, which one or more would you have high degrees of intellect, and how would you suggest that others increase their intellects that you have high degrees in through your own methods?
Well, the 3 I would say that I've been developing the longest would be logical, mathematical, musical, and spatial.
Mm-hmm.
And so the logical mathematical one is the first one I was aware of. I was aware of it when I was a child, because I would do very well in math, and I was very good at Sudoku. I could do it very quickly. And even as an adult, I don't really have phone games. I don't really play games on my phone, but one of the few that I do are number puzzles. I like weird number puzzles that don't require specific mathematical knowledge. It's just purely figuring out the patterns and how the numbers relate, that sort of thing. I would probably enjoy creating those for others. I've always been very strong in that, but I think that's just because that was the first one that I became aware of. So I did gravitate a lot towards puzzles and solving them and eventually creating them. And there were times in my life where my main activities, even during childhood, were creating levels and games that other people had to figure out. And I loved that. I loved that I could create, but also improve this form of intelligence. And musical, I actually thought I did not have much of this growing up, because I'm actually not the best when it comes to learning instruments. And I'll go over that later, but I've found that that's not actually musical intelligence. That would be bodily kinesthetic, a lot of it. You still have to have the musical intelligence, but the ability to actually play in real time also involves strong bodily kinesthetic. So I did not have that to that degree. So I thought that, I must not be a musician. I can't play the guitar very well. I can't play the piano with 2 hands. So it wasn't until I realized that I could create music without doing any of that when I realized that I do have musical intelligence. And once I started creating music, I realized that I always had it. I just doubted how much I had it. So for that one, for me, just the process of listening to music my whole life and then being able to create it myself has been the biggest factor in growing musical intelligence for me.
Okay. So just to recap what you said, when in terms of the mathematical, it would seem through number puzzles. That was a method that helps you to enhance your mathematical intellect. Your spatial intellect was via world building with video games.
Yeah.
Musical, it was what was your strategy for the musical to enhance it?
Find a way to create music without requiring myself to actually play instruments in real time. And once I could do that, it was much more natural for me.
Okay. And what would be an example of playing music? I mean, creating music without, you said, playing it?
Yeah, so creating music. So if you have a digital audio workstation, a lot of people use Pro Tools or Cubase. I personally use Reason.
Mm-hmm.
All of them have a feature where you can draw in the notes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I do all of the instrumentation for all of my songs. I never play anything live. I draw in all of the notes exactly where I hear them to be and where I believe they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I can do that much more quickly than actually trying to play it perfectly on the keyboard and then quantizing it later.
Okay. So for people who are unaware of the musical software that he's referring to and its features, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're talking about writing in notes, that a part of that process is you can click on a note or press a button which would allow you to hear the sound, correct?
Yes, and you can put it anywhere. It corresponds to a grid, and you can put it anywhere. You can choose the length of the note and everything.
Okay. And so due to your exposure to hearing the sounds and arranging how the notes will be played in sequence is a method and strategy that helps you to enhance your musical intellect, correct?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, appreciate that. The next part, the second question in context to the multiple intelligence theory, you said you have high degrees in 3. Which of the remaining 6 would you like? Which of the remaining 6 would you or would you not like to enhance, and why?
Well, I know several of my friends know exactly how I'm going to answer this because they know that I struggle with this. And I've already alluded to it, but connecting the mind to the body has always been a major struggle for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not talking about things like playing sports. I can do hand-eye coordination just fine, but when it comes to even things like moving my fingers at a proper rhythm, that's very, very hard for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not a good piano player.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons why I would like to improve this is because I only experience emotions in my brain,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel them in my whole body. I just feel them up here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because I'm not coordinating my mind and my body
Mm-hmm.
very well. And I've lived my whole life just thinking, oh yes, the brain is controlling everything and the body's just kind of following along.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived life with that mentality that I'm a brain in a jar that has a body below it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's 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 just kept me out of sync with my physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And just improving that, there are so many benefits to that. You're not only, you can learn. If you want to learn to dance, you can do that. If you want to learn, of course, to play a musical instrument, you can do that. If you have better bodily kinesthetic intelligence, but also you can feel emotions in your entire body. And I'm still struggling with this. This is one that's going to take me some time to get down. But yes, that is one that's at the top of my list to improve, that I feel is lower than where it needs to be.
Okay. I can relate to that. I mean, emotions is something that I've been challenged with myself. I think my solutions to that, to have a better sense of my emotions, and have a holistic connection with the various forms of my whole body, is solitude. I think solitude helps you to become more self-aware. And I think there's a difference between being alone and lonely. I think
Yeah.
lonely is a mind state,
Hmm.
and solitude is something, it's like an experience that is outside of yourself, but it helps you to become connected with yourself. Um, I also would suggest considering being more intuitive versus acting off of, and I don't know if it's you, but for me personally, I'm becoming more intuitive in my actions versus letting my thoughts dictate my movements. And
Very good.
I use an example. Well, firstly, my method in terms of enhancing my intuition is I actually have become I've been enhancing my bodily kinesthetic intellect through exercise.
Mm.
And I've been intentionally, so I like to do push-ups, sit-ups, and I run. Well, actually, I'll take that back. I power walk. I actually like power walk. Some people, when they do push-ups, they have a preset amount of push-ups that they expect to achieve. I'm going, like, so person may tell me like, oh, I'm going to do 25 sit-ups tomorrow,
Yeah.
which I've done a lot of times. But we talked about how being in our heads can actually be distracted from the present moment,
Hmm.
which is, I think, is counterintuitive to being intuitive. So what I decided to do is experiment with a new way of exercising. So rather than counting how many sit-ups that I should do, I no longer count. I just start doing sit-ups. And if I feel that my body um, doesn't want to do anymore, I just simply stop, be it 1 or 50. And so that initiation, that type of activity actually is helping me to become more intuitive.
That's very good.
Um, Another thing that I realize how important intuition is that I think I've been conditioned. I allow myself to be conditioned that it's necessary to preconceive things in order to live, generate ideas in my head in order to live in the present moment. But I
Mm.
think that's not how our bodies function, because if in order to act we need to think first, then logically, in terms of taking breaths, inhaling and exhaling, we should then also at all times be thinking inhale, exhale. But
Mm.
if we did that, I think we would actually become stressed because we're overthinking.
It's
And
true. If you think about everything, yes, that's going to happen.
so if it's possible for our bodies to function without having to preconceptualize or conceptualize, um, it's just a matter of being aware of that possibility and becoming aligned and attuned with a new way of living. And I do think it's possible to do that. And I'm trying to like become more aligned with that type of a possibility day by day.
Definitely. Yes.
Another another thing that I want to suggest too is actually a tool that I use, which is copper jewelry. Copper is a conductor of energy. And I'm currently wearing a copper necklace. And what it helps me to do, it helps my body to regulate my energies versus in a natural way. What I mean by that is it's possible for an individual to overthink. It's possible for an individual to overuse their physical energy, such as overworking themselves physically. So when you wear copper jewelry, it helps you to become aware of when you're starting to overthink and overextend yourself physically. And once you have that type of awareness, then it's like, oh, I didn't even know that this is possible because I've been conducting myself in a different way, not for days, but maybe even years. And so I would recommend considering wearing copper jewelry because it would help you to have an awareness of how your body is conducting yourself. And it will help you to maybe dysregulate to regulate how you should be conducting yourself naturally. Also.
Interesting. Copper.
Yes. And so, yeah, I wear a copper necklace. Well, I will say if you invest in it, it can be a necklace, a bracelet, earrings, but it works more efficiently when it's actually touching your skin within your, it's actually within your natural magnetic field.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And I appreciate you sharing with me your the intellect that you would like to enhance. I felt that was valuable information. Hopefully other people can relate to it. I know that we're getting close to the end of the podcast, but there is one final section that I would want to address before we close out. And this section is called Interpreting Expression. And to give a description of this, I am going to quote either a statement or a question that someone else created and provide my interpretation of the statement or question, and also ask Skull about the statement or question. How would he interpret it? And then the second part is, how relatable is it to ourselves? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then, let me see, maybe I'm just going to read it. So I don't think I could share my screen. Okay. You ready, Skull?
Certainly.
Okay. It's going to be a statement. The statement is, we outgrow what we once thought we could not live without, and fall in love with what we thought we didn't need. The universe guides us on paths we may not go on if it were up to us. Do not be afraid, or rather, hopeful. Skull, how would you interpret that question?
Well,
Statement. Sorry.
At any point in your life, you do have things you believe you can't live without, or things that you believe are inherently, permanently a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you grow, you find a way to grow so that you realize that these are not actually inherent parts of you. They're just things maybe that got thrown in at a certain point. And at the same time, you might be in a place in your life where you don't realize, oh yeah, this thing, it's not important to me. And then you grow a little more and you eventually realize, oh, this thing is great. I didn't appreciate it before, but I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so one example of the first part for me was anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up thinking that, oh yeah, there's something wrong with the brain. It's just an inherent quality. It's something I'm always going to have to deal with.
Mm.
Thank you for the pills, doctor. That's what I thought the solution was, because
Mm.
that's societally what, if that's a word, what the solution tends to be is, oh yeah, suppress it and it'll go away while it's suppressed, but you have to do it again another day. Uh, when it when I approached it as something that had a root cause that was not just some chemical imbalance, or even approaching that as having a root cause, then I looked at ways that I could resolve it. I looked at everything that was causing it. And when I realized it was just my thought patterns and things that were unresolved, old beliefs, old trapped emotions, everything, I I I guess you could say I uninstalled it from the system. Um,
Mm.
but in if you had told me 2 years before doing that that was possible without, Western medicine's approach to it, I would have said, ah. I would have responded in that exact voice. And so I thought, because I thought I couldn't live without it. I thought it was inherently a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the second part, the universe guides us on paths we may not go on if it were up to us. Well, then we have to ask, why would we not go on this path?
Mm-hmm.
What is the sometimes it's just fear that's keeping us from going on this path. Maybe it's fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have faith in where you're being guided,
Mm-hmm.
then you will understand why you're going on that path
Mm-hmm. Have you?
eventually. Yeah.
How relatable is the second part of that statement to you?
Very relatable. It's even little things in my life, like little shifts I've made, to from going on the same walk every day to just not thinking about where I'm going to go and ending up somewhere beautiful like a rose garden.
Mm.
That's, if I let fear say, well, if I go this way, then this is going to happen. And if I go this way, it's going to be a longer walk. If I go this way, I'm going to end up having to cross a bunch of major intersections, all sorts of that. If I let that go, then who knows where I'll end up. But
Mm.
if I'm hopeful, then I can have faith that I will end up in a place that helps me on my growth.
Mm. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. I think I can share my how would I interpret that? I would interpret this as this, we outgrow what we once thought we could not live without. We outgrow what we once thought we could not live without. Um, I think, yeah, I think me surrendering to those people that I thought, or I theorized were my friends, and choosing not to chase those relationships, um, helped me to realize that those relationships were not going to support my growth, even though it was kind of potentially frightening because I invested so much time and energy and had so many memories with these individuals. Um, and it's like, well, I've been with these people for months, or if not years. Um, what could possibly happen next? Would Is it possible that if I choose to walk away from these relationships that I spent so much time and energy with, that I may encounter something better, not even better, but something that is more an experience beneficial? Or would I just simply end up encountering the same type of people? So why not just stay in the same situation? So that's why I interpret that part. The last part, the universe guides us on paths that the universe guides us on paths we may not go on if it were up to us. Do not be afraid, but rather hopeful. During the pandemic, I lost my job as a stagehand, because as a stagehand, we set up for concerts and conventions. And during the pandemic, during the lockdown, there were no shows, no events for 2 years. So I ended up entering a new industry. I started working as a mail carrier. And I was excited about the opportunity, because when I think about working for the mail service, as a mail carrier, I was doing a service to my community. I was providing mail to people who needed it, especially like I used to deliver like ironically prescription medications, but it was to elderly people. Some people may need them. So I just felt good about going about being responsible, providing these things that people needed, gifts that family members would send to other family members. I would deliver those. So I was excited about the experience. But then unexpectedly, I started encountering circumstances that indicated that this was not the industry that I was destined for. These situations, or these experiences, were work related. The mail trucks are very old. They're from the 1970s, and they're unsafe to drive. There were several times where I was driving my mail truck that they would break down, to the point where I was on the freeway and the treading on the tires was so bad. As I was going onto the on-ramp, it like hydroplaned. And another situation was in the dashboard, when you're shifting gears, there's a gear shift indicator that lets you know if you're in park, drive, neutral, etc. I was issued a mail carrier truck where the indicator was broken. So I didn't know if I was in park, neutral, reverse, or whatever. And there's protocol for a mail carrier before they take the truck out on the route to report damage to the supervisor, which I did. I told him, I was like, I don't know what gear I'm in if I'm shifting gears. His response was, oh, you just got to fill it out. You got to. I'm like, what did you just say to me? I was like, wow. I was shocked too, Skull. I thought, this is a government agency. They should not be saying this type of stuff and like out in the open. Like,
maybe that's why they're saying it.
And they were aware that these vehicles were like unsafe to drive. So I just felt intuitively that this was not, over time, when I started encountering these circumstances, I felt like it was time to transition. But it was still during the time of the pandemic, or we were starting to get out of the pandemic, when I decided to leave. So shows were starting to come back, but they were scarce. And I had my own apartment. So I had rent to pay. But at the same time, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I could potentially get injured while on the job. And in addition to that, when you sign documentation that states that a vehicle is broken, but they still tell you to drive it, if you voluntarily drive the mail truck after documenting that it's broken and you get into an accident, I would be liable, not the postal service. So it was just so many red flags that inspired me to take a leap of faith and walk away from the job and go back to where I was originally.
And that's good that you picked up on them, that you recognized them as signs pointing you in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And so there was a time after I left the post office, there was a time for about a month when I started back as a stagehand. There was scarce jobs, and I wasn't getting any calls because the jobs are dispatched to us via phone. And I still had rent to pay. Fortunately, I had saved some money when I was working at the post office. But then unexpectedly, I get a phone call and they were like, "Hey, can you work in San Francisco for this convention?" I was like, "Yeah." And that was only one job though. It's still some uncertainty if I was going to get them consecutively. But fortunately, over time, phone calls started to come in with consistency to the point where I was able to save money, pay my rent, and not be in a dangerous work environment. So I took a leap of faith, which the universe was guiding me, and it worked out.
That is good. That is good, especially that you were picking up on the negative things happening that were guiding you in that way, because sometimes the universe will guide you that way.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to me as well in a job that I really enjoyed working for my old elementary school. I worked there for a year as a paraeducator, and after my first year, it was a 1-year position, so it expired at the end of the school year. I would have to reapply. So I was at the end of the school year, I was evaluating whether or not I should reapply and return for the next year. And I was on the fence. The very last day of the entire school year, there are no kids on this day, luckily, on this particular day. It was a teacher work day, and I was hanging something up, like a border in one of the bulletin boards in the hallway, and the stapler jams up. So I'm I have no idea how to unjam the stapler because it's being unusually unruly. And then I hear a click sound and I feel something in my finger, and I look over and the staple has gone all the way into my finger, and I can see the end of it on my fingernail. It was surprisingly painless, and it was pulled out pretty quickly, and it healed just fine. But to me, that was a pretty clear sign. It was not in my path to come back a second year.
Cool story. And I'm glad you're recovered.
Easy, quick recovery. Had to wear a Band-Aid for a week. That's it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Skull, for being a part of the Journey of Self-Growth, episode 10. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in. If you are interested and available in being a future guest on the show, there is an open invitation to do so. You can contact me via my Instagram at kete.music. That's KETE.MUSIC. You can follow me there and send me a message, or if you're friends with Skull and you're interested, you can send him a message and relay it to me, and I will be in contact with you. He has my email address, so he can forward that to me also. Skull, what would your parting words be?
I'm grateful to everyone who joined us today. I am very, very, very pleased to see so many of you who are interested in the subject of self-growth, even though I know many of you already are. I'm still grateful for the turnout.
Yes, as am I. And self-growth, believe it or not, it's a continuous, maybe even indefinite journey, but from my perspective, it's enjoyable. Well, with that being said, I hope everyone will enjoy the rest of the evening. I appreciate you all. Good night. Oh, you still there?